The White Pill is available now at whitepillbook.com. This episode is brought to you by Patriot Gold. Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. We have with us a very special guest. We have Joe McBride, who is a prominent attorney. He defended several of the January 6th martyrs, and we're going to talk about what they were up to as a consequence of that political persecution in a moment. We're also going to get his thoughts on the President Trump indictment, and he represents the Tate brothers as well. We were talking a little bit before we recorded, and Joe, like me, is originally from Bensonhurst, although you sound a lot more like it than I do.
Yeah, it's a good place to be from. You know, if you can make it here and get out of here and make it somewhere else, well, then that's a good thing too.
I miss it vividly. The pizzeria from Saturday Night Fever is still there, up and kicking. So if anyone has a chance, make sure you check that out. But one of the things let's get right into it. So how many of the January 6th guided tour people did you happen to represent?
Represented directly 6 of them. I am in the background on advising on another 20 cases or so over any given time. That's just specifically with regard to people who've been charged with January 6th related crimes by the Department of Justice. I've also taken people up before the January 6th committee, when that whole sham thing was happening. And then I also represent different people who have been targeted by the Department of Justice with subpoenas pursuant to the investigations into President Trump.
So let me just, for the sake of clarity for the audience, make clear my perspective. I think if someone is committing violence, especially against someone, say a civilian officer, that's obviously not acceptable. That's an assault. It's a pretty black and white situation. But if someone is walking on public property and staying within the velvet ropes and is taking pictures and leaving, the idea of rounding them up and putting them in a gulag for months without any kind of basic legal repercussions, legal recourse, is to me depraved. I would like to hear from you, because there's so much rumors and misinformation in the corporate press, exactly what was done to these people. Because the impression I have, and I'm speaking as an ignorant civilian, is that they were not treated even like a regular murderer who has access to a lawyer, who, in many cases can get out on bail, who is not treated that innocent until proven guilty. That did not seem to be the case with your clients. Can you explain that to us, please?
Sure. So I think in order to give a proper context to the explanation and why I was sort of, I don't want to say privy, but I became aware and I was more tuned into this information early on, is because my experience as a criminal defense attorney in New York City. Prior to going out on my own, I worked for the Innocence Project and the Legal Aid Society as a public, as a public defender. So well acquainted with Rikers Island. I've had.
Let me interrupt you to explain these people, these organizations. I've donated money to the Legal Aid Society, and I know people who work for the Innocence Project. The Innocence Project is something that I think a lot of people should support, no matter where you stand in the political spectrum, because they use things like DNA evidence to prove that many people who are on death row were not, in fact, murderers and things like this. And I think COVID demonstrates to a lot of conservatives that they think, well, just don't commit a crime and nothing will happen to you. Well, when the government has its eye on you and has decided to make you into a murderer, especially if you're poor and uneducated and unintelligent, what are you going to do? And some of these people who might not be nice people, maybe they're just robbers, all of a sudden are facing death row. So I think they do terrific work. And I just want to interrupt you. I'm sorry to make a little bit commercial for what they do.
No, that's okay. And I agree with you 100%. Politics aside, they do wonderful work, and you can't take that away from anybody. I went there because law is a second career for me. I became an attorney, went to school in response to my own brother's wrongful accusation got tricked into signing a 15-year plea deal. He is schizophrenic, didn't have the right kind of lawyer, was not properly medically evaluated. Before I knew what was going on, he was getting dragged away in black and white stripes and handcuffs saying I'm innocent. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? What world am I living in? I went back home. I saw my mom and dad that night. I said, I got to do something. I hadn't even gone to college at the point. So I said to my brother, I said, you got a 15-year sentence. I could become a lawyer in half that time. I'll go to school and I'll get you out. It took me, I couldn't even add fractions when I showed up at college. I cajoled my way into the entrance exam. I got in, I graduated at the top of my class, went to Benjamin Cardozo School of Law, did well there as well, hit the floor running, but I committed myself toward fighting for people who have been unfairly targeted by the government or other entities, institutional entities for very unfair reasons. It's why I started as an intern with the Innocence Project, went to legal aid for 5 years, and then I started defending, Trump supporters after January 6th, because I believe that they are the most targeted and persecuted class in the United States of America. So having that background, it really gave me some sense of what to look for when my guys were going in. And I knew that the politics of the people who were running the jail, both at the top and the bottom, were very different than the men who were being sent there.
Yep.
And that because of that, this was kind of like the inverse of a group of black guys getting sent to jail in Alabama in 1940. It's not going to end well. So I was all over it from Jump Street. And when I first got onto these cases, I was made aware very early of the egregious conditions of confinement, the denial of medical care, the interruptions with the attorney-client privilege, the beatings, the macings, the roaches in the food.
Hold on. You're going very quickly. That's, I think, a key to this. Can you break down exactly how your clients were being treated?
Yes. So when I first came onto these cases, my clients were all being held in solitary confinement. I took my first case in February of 2021. In New York State, you have something called the CARES Act. Some of it's good, some of it's terrible. But one of the good things about it is it incorporates the Nelson Mandela rules for prisoner treatment and conduct. Why is that relevant? Because one of the things the Mandela rules speak about is solitary confinement. Solitary confinement is defined as captivity absent meaningful human contact for 22 hours or more a day in a cell. Okay, we get that. Prolonged solitary confinement is defined as solitary confinement for 15 days or more. Prolonged solitary confinement under international law via the Mandela rules, and now New York State and 16 other states, is by definition defined as torture. Some of these guys were kept in solitary confinement for like 9 months. Okay.
So I think people should realize that when we think of torture, we think wood under your fingernails, they're causing you physical pain. I know people who are on the show Big Brother, right? And they're confined to that house, for 24/7, and they can't talk. They have people they're talking to, but not their loved ones. They all go a little loopy. I dare anyone thinking about this. We're not talking about mass murderers. We're not talking about people who prey on children. We talk about people who have not been convicted of anything, and try to imagine being locked in a room and you have no one to talk to. You're going to go crazy. And 9 months is no joke. Even a week in that situation is absolutely no joke, because human beings are social animals. Without any kind of recourse to some other conversation, your brain starts going loopy because there's nothing for it to do. Look at people who have border collies in their house, right? And the dogs start chewing up the furniture because they've no outlet for their brains. So I'm glad you brought that up, and I absolutely agree that it's absolutely clearly torture. And in this situation, these people were not at all even accused, let alone convicted, of assaulting anyone, killing anyone, or any kind of these violent crimes where you're like, okay, I can't have this inmate in Gen Pop because they're going to start stabbing COs.
Right. So I think it's important to talk about the difference when you have somebody who went to the Capitol and they're 60 years old, they're 50 years old, they're 40 years old, and they have no prior criminal history, and they're charged with assaulting the police officer. You have to ask yourself, how did that happen? Why did that happen?
Yep.
And how did it happen to so many people? And the answer is this: when a good man or a good woman, but most of them are men, when a good man is in a situation and he's not a criminal and he sees a cop beating the crap out of somebody, he says, "Hey, officer, don't do that."
Yep.
And if the cop is really hurting the person, he says, "Officer, don't effing do that." And then if the cop is beating somebody and that somebody happens to be a woman or an older person and they're on the floor bleeding, good men take action. That's what happened there. Lots of men went to the Capitol, no prior history of violence, didn't go there looking for any fight with the police because
Right.
they're pro police, and they saw this Tiananmen Square like crackdown
Yep.
on free speech. People who were praying, people who were singing, they were macing people, beating people, shooting people with bullets. And people acted because good men act in situations like that. And because they did that, they put them in solitary. Some of them were violent, some of them were not violent, allegedly violent. But as we know from Kyle Rittenhouse, not all violence is illegal.
Yep.
There was no sunlight. There was poorly ventilated spaces. They opened up a part of the DC jail that had been closed for years. It was literally a cobwebby gulag with paint and lead paint coming off the walls, roaches on the floor, rats, mold. And they just threw these guys in there. And they said, "Well, you're never getting out." And they psychologically tortured them. They mentally tortured them. They tried to push these guys to the point of breaking. But because the majority of these people are faith-based people, they had something else inside of them that allowed them to connect with a higher power in this universe to prevent them from being breaking. And that's what this communist regime who's currently in power does not understand. They have grossly underestimated the power of a free-thinking man who believes in country, who believes in God, and how willing and how deep he is willing to go to stand on principle and his rights despite the torture.
Can I ask you this? How many? I'm going to disagree a little bit. I think they understood that they can get away with whatever they wanted because they're not going to have any opposition from the other side. Have any prominent politicians or pundits, politicians, let's stick to that, come to the defense of your clients, or at least spoken out positively, spoken out against how they were being treated? Because I think that would be key.
Yes, that's a great question. So to the first part of your point, the DC jail staff from the top to the bottom. I mean, there were Catherine Landerkin was the warden at the time, and she was saying "F Trump" on Twitter and all this other stuff. All Trump supporters deserve to die, whatever it is. And she's like the caretaker of these people who are in jail. The guards was showing up with "I voted for Biden," BLM, whatever these shirts are, letting the guys know that we're on the other side and that we have a green light to do whatever we want to do to you. So here is the process. Here is what happened. Once I found out what was going on, the first people I reached out to was the ACLU and
Yep.
Amnesty International. I went on CNN and I told the world on CNN, "Hey, people are being tortured 5 miles from the White House in Washington, D.C." Sorry about the
That's
background.
the
Please.
that's the Brooklyn siren I do not miss.
That's Brooklyn for you. Yes, sir. And I reached out to them, Dick Durbin, Senator Elizabeth Warren. Nobody blinked an eye. These are people who championed these issues in the past. The ACLU, not one left-leaning member of Congress or anybody else got back to us. So then I went to members of the Freedom Caucus.
Yep.
I went to anybody who would speak to me, but it was the Freedom Caucus who invited me in. And we had a moment in time there. It was very beautiful. I'm a Puerto Rican and Irish guy from Brooklyn. Most of the people I've defended, and most of the people on the Puerto Rican and black side of my family, lots of the guys have been to prison. The Irish side, some of them, but not so much. There's a disproportionate impact there for sure. I had to have a conversation with them. And I said, "Listen, when your Democratic colleagues reach out to you and they say, 'Where the hell have you been for the past 100 years on this issue? Your guys are in jail, and all of a sudden now you care.' Your answer is this: you're right. We were wrong. We are sorry. We take accountability for our
Yeah.
absence. How can we move forward?" And guess what? They all agreed. And so I had multiple people from Congress reach out, go down to the jail, participate, speak out, hold protests, lots of different members. I can rattle off the names if you
Please
want to.
do. Please do.
Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Louis Gohmert, when he was in office, championed this issue. Congressman Clay Higgins has been absolutely stellar. Byron Donaldson, new members like Anna Paulina Luna and Corey Mills have been speaking out on the issues as well. Lots of people on the right, people who were never ever interested in prison reform before,
Right.
all of a sudden championing the issue. And it's a real opportunity for people on the left to come over and work upon a bipartisan issue, but they won't do it. So the answer to your question is yes, these members stood up, they spoke out, they received a great amount of criticism for it. They were called conspiracy theorists. They went down to the jail. They were first denied access. They kept going. They got in. And once they began to get into these places, they saw what the conditions were. We got DC jail shut down at one point. We got Northern Neck Regional Jail in Warsaw, Virginia, which is analogous to a concentration camp. We got that place shut down. We had a few other places shut down and running from the hills. We filed multiple motions, habeas corpus petitions. I got all my guys out except for one. I mean, we litigated the hell out of this because
wonderful.
It was objectionable. It was wrong, and it can't happen. But most people either don't believe or just don't care. And there's a bunch of people out there, especially in DC, that say, you know what, lock these people up and throw away the key. They're all getting what they deserve simply because they stepped on DC soil on that day.
Folks, if you dress well, you will feel well at the office. And I want to talk to you about Rhone, Rhone. Men's closets were due for a radical reinvention, and Rhone stepped up to the challenge. Their commuter collection is the most comfortable, breathable, and flexible set of products known to man. And here's why. You can get ready for any occasion with their collection. They've got the world's most comfortable pants, dress shirts, quarter zips, and polos. You never have to worry about what to wear when you have the Rhone commuter collection. And their 4-way stretch fabric provides breathability and flexibility that leaves you free to enjoy what life throws your way, from your commute to work to going out to the bar. It's time to feel confident without the hassle. With Rhone's wrinkle-free release technology, wrinkles disappear as you stretch and wear the products. It's that easy. There's more. With their gold infusion anti-odor technology, you'll be smelling fresh and clean all day long. And on top of that, Rhone is 100% machine washable, so you can ditch the dry cleaner altogether. They sent me a few of their products. It's really simple to match with anything in your wardrobe. So it is comfortable, and it is reliable, and it is dependable. The Commuter Gold collection can get you through any workday and straight into whatever comes next. Head to rhone.com/malice, RHONE, and use promo code malice. You get 20% off. That's 20% off your entire order when you head to rhone.com/malice and use code malice. It's time to find your corner office comfort. Folks, did you know that your temperature at night can have one of the greatest impacts on your sleep quality? And if you wake up too hot or too cold, I recommend you check out Miracle Made's bed sheets. They're inspired by NASA. Miracle Made uses silver-infused fabrics and makes temperature-regulating bedding so you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night long. These fabrics were inspired by NASA. They're thermoregulating. They're designed to keep you at the perfect temperature all night long. You get better sleep every night. And because they're infused with silver, that prevents up to 99.7% of bacterial growth. They stay cleaner, fresher, 3 times longer than other sheets. No more gross odors. And they're very comfortable without the high price tag of other luxury brands. They feel as nice, if not nicer, than bed sheets used by some 5-star hotels. Stop sleeping on bacteria. Clean sheets means less bacteria to clog your pores, fewer breakouts, and other skin problems. Go to trymiracle.com/malice to try Miracle Made sheets today. And if you're buying them for yourself as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use code malice at checkout, you get 3 free towels and save another 20%. Here's the kicker. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. If you don't like it, you get a full refund. So upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/malice. Use code malice. Get your 3-piece towel set for free and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/malice to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode. Let's get back to the show. The one of the points I always make with conservatives, and I'm sure you remember this as well, is when they had the Patriot Act, they had Gitmo, and it's like it's just for terrorists, just for terrorists. And I tell them we are in a country where I'd say, let's say 20%, I'm pulling that number out of my ass, but a certain number of people will tell you with a straight face that if you're a member of the NRA, you're a terrorist. Like, this is a talking point all the time. So today's terrorist is going to be you tomorrow, and this certainly came true at January 6th. And if you think the government can't decide to fix its eye on you and that they have unlimited resources, and they have unlimited time, they can bleed you dry, or they can just try to break you. God help you if you happen to be the one who got that so-called the opposite of a lottery. And it was very easy when it's like, okay, some marginalized community or some group that you're not a part of, or even if someone's a burglar. Like if someone's a burglar, and they just get away with it, or a shoplifter, I don't think they should have life in jail in solitary. I mean, this is so
God,
completely
no.
disproportionate. But people think in these terms like it's not me, so I don't care. But yeah, it's not you yet. And very quickly you see someone owning a gym, who wanted to just have a health club or bar open, is going to jail, or it became a felony to have a funeral or visit your mom in the nursing home. So very quickly, these protections for so-called terrorists, you're the terrorist because you don't want to get a vaccine, is the logic. And that's how the law works. And I'm sure you've seen this a lot in your work defending people.
Of course, we've seen it. And what's troubling is that, after September 11th, everything changed.
Yes.
I'll be there. Look, I'm from New York City, and I'll be the first person to tell you, I'm not a prejudiced guy. But if I were to have sat on a plane in 2003 and look over and see a guy in Muslim garb, I'm going to go, oh shit, is this plane going to go down? Why did I think that? That's a good man. He doesn't do drugs. He doesn't drink. He prays 5 times a day. He's probably got like 6 kids. He works his butt off. He takes care of his family here. He takes care of his family abroad. He loves this country, which is why he came here, and he loves God. But I'm looking at him through the lens of suspicion, because if you see something, say something. Because you got to look to the left of you and you got to look to the right of you, and you have to spy and you have to tell on your fellow citizen or people who are living in your country on behalf of the government. I know you understand this. You talked about it in your book, right? You talked about it in your book. You talked
Yes.
about how the Russians, incorporated the general population to make them an extension of the surveillance state. How people don't understand this now is beyond me, and it's not a conspiracy theory. It is happening in real time, and people just don't get it. I'll never understand for the life of me.
Well, I think it's comes they're told that they're the in group, the good guys, and the bad guys are doing these things on TV, and I'm not doing that thing on TV. So not only will they do it, they'll go on social media and brag about it. How many? I mean, I'll tell this story that you're really going to. Do you know Eliza Orleans, by the way? She worked for.
I do. I used to work with her. We
Okay.
were in the same office.
So she's a pal of mine. The show got its name because of her, to be honest,
Is that
because
right?
Eliza would always correct people with asterisk your on Twitter when they misspelled yours. So I made a point to spell it wrong on purpose, and so on and so forth. And she's very passionate. She does great work, but it's, people like to think that if they're obedient, they'll be taken care of. And it's like, yes, to a point. But then when the script flips, no one's going to defend you if you don't have these legal protections in place. So, thank you so much for the work that you do. So you got these. So let me ask this from, we talk a lot about separation of powers, and a lot of this was political. Of course, you have the MAGA versus the Democrats and the corporate press. How receptive in general were the judges that you were adjudicating these situations with? Do they still have that semblance of innocence until proven guilty, and that even criminals or alleged criminals have some robust legal protections? Or was it like, screw this, throw away the key? Or it could even be, I'm getting my orders from up high, so my hands are tied. Can you talk about that a bit?
The All of the case law that applied. Let's talk about just the issue of pretrial detention, and then you can extrapolate this to everything else. But there was a whole body of case law, especially from 1984, which was when the Bail Reform Act and the federal system happened, up until January 5th of 2021. All that case law with regard to pretrial detention went out the window on January 6th.
Okay.
They said January 6th was an attack on democracy, a day that is incomparable to any other day in the history of this country, which is a flat out lie. But they distinguished it and made it into a terrorist attack without affirmatively saying it was one in court, but constructively
Yes. Yeah.
they treated it like one. And because of that, what did they do? They did the same thing to the people who are in Guantanamo Bay. Namely, they created a sub-constitutional class of people whose offenses against the state were so egregious that the protections of the Constitution and the preceding court case law, the years of precedent, no longer applied to them. So they carved out new law and made new law via the cases to create mechanisms to keep these guys in jail. It is the single most egregious violation of court precedent that I've ever seen in my life. I did not think something like this was possible, especially at this federal level, especially in Washington, D.C. But that is exactly what has happened. Now, it's dialing back somewhat, but the first 2 years of this, forget it. You might as well have been a person, an Ashkenazi Jew going up in front of the Nazis in 1930 Germany, or whatever it was going to be, 1931 Germany, right? The message was clear. We don't like you because of who you are and what you believe in. There is something specifically identifiable about you that we find so troublesome and so loathsome that we are willing to throw out all of the rules to put you in jail and to send a message to anybody else who may dare to think like you that if you cross that line, this is where you end up too.
And I would encourage anyone listening to this who has that kind of dichotomy in their head, be like, sure, we have these constitutional protections, but they don't apply for terrorists. And that makes logical sense to a point. But then ask yourself, how confident are you, given your views, whoever's listening to this, that every judge would not agree that you're a terrorist, that every officer would not agree that you're a terrorist? And what happens to you when you find that judge? And if you have this exception for terrorists, who decides that you're a terrorist? Wouldn't you want to have those protections in place? Or do you want to have someone who might be your political opposite have the liberty to be like, oh, I'm just going to check off this column so everything else goes in the trash and we're going to lock you up and throw away the key, even though no one is claiming that you're in any way a possible threat to people in your community. No one's there was, I correct me if I'm wrong, there was no claim that if your clients were out on the street that they'd be stabbing kids and raping women and burning down buildings, correct?
The way that they achieved dangerousness, the way that they met the bar, was they said that your ideas, your beliefs, and your tweets and your Facebook messages and your private interpersonal communications on text and in emails with your family and friends are indicia of somebody who, if released back into society, will commit an act of violence against their community members or the U.S. government.
So you must, you must feel really great that if you couldn't help your brother, at least you're helping get some of these people out. So I do commend you on that. If you had this kind of burden that you were up against, how were you successful in getting your clients out with that one exception?
The same sort of way of thinking and qualities that got me through life as a street smart kid from Brooklyn: grit, determination, a refusal to quit, the understanding that where there is a will, there is a way, faith in God, faith in myself, faith in the truth, just hammering away until we found a way. Because there's always a way. You just got to keep trying.
But what were those ways that you found? Like, what actually worked? What was cogent with the judges?
Sure, that's a great question. So, in Richard Barnett's case, he was the gentleman who had his feet up on Nancy Pelosi's desk. Nobody thought we could get him out. The idea was simple: no criminal history, no violence, no leadership in any sort of hate group or alleged hate group. Sort of went there that day, acted like an idiot. But in terms of, his ability to function in the world, you got to factor in all these years of good behavior in conjunction with the fact that he's got no violent record. He wasn't violent there that day, to paint a picture for this guy that he's redeemable. And there is a combination of conditions under which, if he was released, he could go back into the world and function. I got a reasonable judge in that case.
Okay.
And the judge heard the case on its merits and he let him out. Right. I'm not going to say anything about any judge by name, but there's reasonable and unreasonable people.
Yes.
And everything. He was and is a reasonable judge. With regard to Adam Jackson's case, Adam was accused of throwing, picked up a riot shield, and he ran into the Capitol Police, tried to cross the goal line, got stuffed at the goal line, got a cut on his head, and he went home. He was out for 16 months, and then or 19 months, and then they arrested him, and they threw him in the jail for 3 months, saying that he was violent. And the question is, well, part of the question is whether or not somebody's violent. We usually speculate. We say, based on their characteristics, based on history, they're going to be violent, they're not going to be violent. No need to speculate here. He was out for all this time. This is cut and dry. Let him out. I got him out. Again, I had a reasonable judge. I was fortunate that I had a reasonable judge. I was fortunate that I had the facts on my side. And, we made the right arguments. Ryan Nichols' case was very hard. It's far more complicated. He's a Marine Corps veteran. He was involved in it was a lot of violence where he was at. Roseanne Boylan died right where he was. Kevin Greason was killed over there. These are protesters who were either beaten or shot with bullets who wound up dying. Incredible amount of violence. Military veteran with PTSD. We had multiple hearings over 2 years. He did 764 days in pretrial detention. Was driven to suicide watch. I mean, he doesn't even look like the same guy anymore. His blood results are all messed up. His liver is shot. I mean, he's in trouble physically and psychologically. Why did we get him out? We were able to articulate to the judge that the attorney-client privilege had been routinely breached, and that he had a Sixth Amendment right under the U.S. Constitution to meaningfully participate in his defense.
Yes.
And that given the volume of video evidence and his inability to access said evidence and other evidence consistently in a way that comports with the Sixth Amendment, that he should be let out. And we were able to get to a point where the judge just said, enough is enough. But that was after like 5 failed tries. He let us out on that little hook. We didn't care how he got out, right, as long as we were able to get him out. So you just got to be inventive. You got to stand strong. Some people are not born really to fight and to not give up. They say the judge says no, and that's it, and they quit and they go home and they go, oh, I guess that's it. No, you got to keep fighting. So we kept fighting and we got them out.
Isn't there some legal term, I'm blanking on the name, that if I arrest you, you have to be charged within a fairly short amount of time? Like, isn't that a very basic bedrock legal principle?
Yeah, speedy trial. Yeah,
right.
You're right. So this is what happened. For the first year, while they were holding people in solitary confinement, 9, 10, 11 months, the Department of Justice was also arguing that because of COVID, the justice system had slowed to a crawl. And because that this was the biggest investigation in the history of the Department of Justice, this is has the biggest budget, more people have been prosecuted, there is no comparison. This is bar none the biggest and most expensive investigation in the storied history of the DOJ, that they needed time to make it through the material and to get the material in a way that they could disseminate to defendants. And because of that, they petitioned the court in every case, at every adjournment, to have the Speedy Trial Act waived. And they did it for a year straight. So the first year didn't even count. And what they did during that year was they tried to break these guys in jail to get them to plea before they were let out. We filed habeas corpus motions. We threatened lawsuits. I mean, we went to war with them, and eventually we started getting rollback on it. And then after the year had passed, none of our guys had seen their stuff because they're handicapped by protective orders. They can't even make it through the material in any meaningful way. Then the DOJ just wakes up one day, says, we're going to start giving you terabits of information at a time, stuff that'll take you a year to go through. And by the way, we're ready to go to a trial next Tuesday. And it's like, oh, wait a second, Judge. They just had the entire year to go through this stuff. We're seeing it for the first time. To this day, it still hasn't all been turned over to us. We need time to go through it. My guy's in jail. He doesn't even have a computer. How does this work? So then we were forced into a position where we had to waive time. And that's how you get guys in jail pre-trial for over 2 years at this point. They planned it perfectly.
But I mean, am I correct that that's extremely unusual? Because my understanding is that I've heard many cases, many such cases. They arrest someone and they're interrogating them, but if you just wait them out, they're like they have to let you go because it's either charge me. Am I being detained? That's the joke, right? Like if you're not going to charge me, you have to let me walk. Isn't that like in every other circumstance or virtually every other circumstance the way things work?
Of course, but these guys were they indicted them, right? So they held these guys. They
Okay,
were indicted, and then they were supposed their speedy trial. We were supposed to be able to see the evidence, process the evidence, and get to trial at the soonest possible time. Because the idea is you're innocent until proven guilty.
right.
You have a right to a speedy trial, and you should get one. But they pumped the brakes. They stopped the train across the board because they could use the pandemic and they could use the size of the investigation to do it. And the judges sided with them, and there was nothing we can do about it. Is this extraordinary? It is the most extraordinarily, violative event of pretrial detainees' rights and the Speedy Trial Act in the history of this country. There's no question about it.
Yeah, if I'm a defendant, I'm treated innocently in terms of the eyes of the law, right? But that's pretty much held to normally,
In
right?
theory,
No, but I'm just saying, like, if you, in most cases, if the prosecutor's like, well, we've got a lot of evidence to go through, it's like, well, too effing bad. That's prejudicial to my client and my freedoms. You haven't proved squat. We have due process. So you put in your overtime. It's not my issue. Isn't that how it normally works?
that is how it normally works. Um, that is how it normally works for people who get treated with dignity and justice.
Yeah. Okay.
However, if you look at your typical African American or Latino male who's prior to the Bail Reform Act, and there are problems with it, obviously, but there are people who would sit at Rikers or Brooklyn Detention House and other places for 2-3 years in pretrial detention because they couldn't afford $500 bail, or they couldn't afford $100 bail or $1,000 bail. Shot, people get stabbed, people get raped, people hang themselves because they can't take it. This is something that has been happening to the African American and Latino community in this country for a very long time, and it was flatly ignored by the right, by Republicans, by sort of your everyday American Joe who had no reason to believe that his country could be so terrible to its own citizens. But if you were to interview members of the minority community, they would say, hey, this has been happening to us forever. Join the club that it's happening to you now. But time. So the idea here is, yes, it's been happening. It's never happened to this group of people. It's never happened this hard, this fast, this egregious on this timeline. Never, ever. But, those two groups need to come together now more than ever. If the members of the minority community who have historically been treated horribly by the justice system and the U.S. government come together with the people who are currently enduring it at a heightened level, the impact that those people could have, that group of people could have, would be massive, would be detrimental to the other side. It would blow a hole in the side of the prison system that it would never recover from. It would bring down the whole prosecutorial apparatus of the United States government that targets people who can't really defend themselves. That's what this is about. And people not seeing that, troubles me.
There, when I was working with D.L. Hughley on his books, he told me, and I would like your confirmation from your professional experience, that what they would do if they want to break somebody is they would arrest the people Friday, like afternoon or evening, because they know that the bail bondsmen are closed over the weekend. So they're putting those people away for effectively, 72 hours. And come Monday morning, people will be tripping over themselves to try to cooperate with the cops, because you do a weekend in jail, it's going to be a wake-up call for even the hardest of us, or maybe not the hardest of us, but certainly people as soft as me or just regular people. Is that in fact the case, that this is the strategy that's employed?
That was in fact the case forever. That's 100% true.
Okay.
But now, with regard to January Sixers, let's say, it's like, well, we'll drop you in for 6 months and we'll talk to you on month 7. You're like, well, what the hell's going on? So it's that on steroids. So the answer is yes, that is historically true. Yes, that still happens. And with regard to the people in the capital prosecutions, it's that on steroids.
Hey folks, billionaire investor Ray DeLeo said increasing the debt limit means there's no meaningful limit on the debt and will eventually lead to a disastrous financial collapse. Bloomberg. warning of a severe economic reset. Gold appears as a caged bull awaiting a catalyst. JP Morgan warned, cut stocks, buy gold, and hold your cash. And the Financial Times said investors are gaga for gold. Wells Fargo said gold is in a super cycle that could last another 6 years. Worst case scenario, $3,000 gold. So searches for how to buy gold on Google hit record levels in April. It's as simple as calling the Patriot Gold Group today to get yours. Find out why they are A+ rated, Consumer Affairs top rated gold and silver company nationwide. Call the proud Americans of Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late and mention my name. That's Michael Malice, and you'll always get best in class service from Patriots protecting Patriots. Patriot Gold Group has the no fee for life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold and silver, and you may be eligible for the no fee for life IRA on qualifying rollovers. All you have to do is call 888-505-9845 to get a free investor guide, or simply just go to malicegold.com. Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs top-rated gold IRA dealer 6 years in a row. So call 888-505-9845 or go to malicegold.com to protect your money. Folks, Michael Malice here, terrible author, horrible person on Twitter, and yes, sheath underwear model. Do you want to get inside my pants? Well, you can with Sheath underwear. What's great about Sheath is their dual pouch technology. They've got one pouch for one part of your male anatomy, another pouch for another part of your male anatomy. The first time I put them on, I'm like, what is this crap? But then I realized these are the most comfortable underwear I've ever worn. I wear them every single day. It was developed by Bobby, who was an Iraq vet. So you know things get uncomfortable down there when you're in the desert. And I've designed my own pair. If you go to sheathunderwear.com and use promo code Malice, you get 20% off, and you could start one step closer to becoming an underwear model just like myself, but not as much of a terrible person like myself. Go to sheathunderwear.com, use promo code Malice, get 20% off today. What's great about this underwear is that it keeps you cool in the hot weather, and it keeps you snug and secure in any situation. And there's something a little subversive about being, like, let's say, on a date or a job interview and knowing that your underwear is cupping your you-know-what downstairs. Sheathunderwear.com, promo code Malice for 20% off. Let's get back to the show. Can you talk a bit about what the status is of these? One of I'm almost scared to ask you this because I think you probably have to tap dance a little bit. One of the things I was most critical about President Trump was, from my perspective, his lack of sticking his neck out on behalf of your clients and many others. These were his people. These people went to DC because they believed in him. They supported him. I do not agree at all that he encouraged them to, engage in any kind of acts of violence. He specifically said peacefully, make your voice heard. But even if you do want to, so that's kind of irrelevant. They were clearly his biggest supporters. And it seems to me that with him, loyalty is very much a one-way street. And only recently now that he's gotten some heat for it, has he started speaking out on behalf of your clients. Can you talk about their status as of now? Are they facing life? What legal obstacles are they up against?
My clients or President Trump's reaction?
Well, both. I mean, I'm just curious what you think of how he has he actually lent a hand, and what are they actually looking at?
Sure. So in terms of what my clients are looking at, there's the full scope. All of them have been charged with felonies. In the aggregate, any one of my clients could go to jail for 20, 30, 40 years based on what they've been charged with. It's absolute ridiculousness for a glorified trespass or doing something. When you look at, to be fair, the BLM and Antifa side of things, it happens all the time. People throw things at cops, set things on fire. And if you set something on fire on January 6th, which actually didn't happen, you'd go to jail for 100 years for being a terrorist. That's just madness. The offers that the government are making are objectively, they're unreasonable. They're disgusting. So they're forcing us to go to trial. They're asking for lots of time. But even when people blow trial, the judges, they're not being light-handed, but they're not being excessively heavy-handed in most cases. These guys are still getting time, but it's not like, what it could be if they really went with the government's recommendation. With regard to President Trump, Trump world, the Trump family, I have been to Mar-a-Lago on many occasions. I know Don Jr. I've met the family on multiple occasions. I've been on their podcast, and I'm just saying that because that's public knowledge about sort of what the world knows about me and my relationship with them. But I have been in that quite some time now. And I can tell you straight up, straight from the heart, that President Trump does care. I have been at the Mar-a-Lago residence on multiple occasions when January 6ers, the families of January 6ers, their loved ones, their children, their wives, people come to events there. Hey, how can you let these people come to your event? They're terrorists. No, I don't believe I'm President Trump. I don't believe in cancellation. Anybody could come. I've seen him embrace people. I've seen him hold people. I've seen him talk to people. I've seen him pray with people. I have talked about these issues at length with everybody in that world. I've been on Don Jr.'s podcast talking about it with Ashley Babbitt's mother, who was shot at the Capitol. Do they care? Absolutely. Here's the very simple answer, the very simple truth. Donald Trump is January 6th number one.
Yeah, that's right.
Higher prosecution is about going after him to making sure that he's in jail, that he can never run for president again. So I do think that he's limited in what he can do. I do think that he has crossed the line in terms of trying to talk and help for people over his counsel's advice on many occasions because he does care. And I do know that if he's elected president again, that the majority of these people who went to the Capitol on January 6th and were convicted of crimes, that he's going to pardon them. I know it for certain.
Okay.
So, but I on the outside, I can see why somebody will go, hey, the guy's a billionaire. Why hasn't he given $1 billion to these people?
Yeah.
Look, I don't have the answers to those questions, right? I don't know his situation like that, but I know when I'm around somebody who's a bullshitter, I know when I'm around somebody who's acting, from a good place and who's being honest with me. You can tell when someone's being honest with you. And everybody in that world has welcomed these people and these families into their lives repeatedly. And let me tell you this also, they haven't treated them. I've seen January 6ers whose families literally come from trailer parks somewhere in anywhere in America, standing next to gazillionaires at Mar-a-Lago at the same buffet line, and everyone is treated the same. And that was something that moved me and that encouraged me to dig down deeper in that world. Now, is he perfect? And is everybody in that world perfect? Hell no. Is there work to do? Hell yes. But do I think that they're good people, and do I think that he's done a good job? I do.
You can move on from this question if you don't feel comfortable answering it, but your clients are in jail. They're obviously not having jobs. Lawyers are not cheap, especially at this level. How are they able to afford your services?
It's a great question. So what we did early on is we started crowd raising.
Oh, wow. Okay, great.
Yeah. I've been on all the big shows. I was on Tucker's show a few times when he was on. It was in his documentaries. I've been on all the big podcasts, and just out there on Twitter, pumping this stuff, saying, "Hey, these guys can't afford this stuff." I was able to come up with the lingo and understand the need for it based on my work as a public defender. In those cases, the government paid. In these cases, the government's not paying for them, or in many instances, the public defenders that they were assigned in DC were not people who should have recused themselves in these cases. When you're somebody who openly just says, look, I think you should be in jail, or January 6th was a terrorist attack, you can't represent these people, right? You shouldn't be on the case. So we went and we started with Give, Send, Go. Give, Send, Go. With GoFundMe. GoFundMe canceled everybody, returned the money. It was a horrible thing. Lots of people, lawyers were already on the cases, and it was just detrimental to everybody. Give, Send, Go stepped up. They made their bones with Kyle Rittenhouse. People were like, don't let Rittenhouse raise money. They said, no, we're principled. People from both sides should be able to fundraise. So Give, Send, Go is the mechanism under which we've been able to crowd raise. Everybody does it across the board. Some cases are way more successful than others. You have to fight algorithms and cancellation and Google suppression search results. But you got to get out there and you got to stump and you got to pump this stuff online. And here's the problem. Because we've been successful in doing that, because it's become an art form, and we begin to we've given the tradecraft away to everybody else to say, hey, this is how you do it. And they're doing it well. What is the government doing? Well, now the government says, you raised $116,000 in your Give, Send, Go. So we're going to hit you with a $116,000 fine. Oh, you raised $57,000.63. Well, now we're going to hit you with a $57,000.63 fine. They are hitting people for the exact amount of money that they raised in their legal funds. And by doing so, they're disincentivizing people from litigating and crushing people for exercising their First Amendment rights. It is disgusting. But that is the newest thing that's happening right now. And we're preparing to litigate those issues in our cases as well, because they're unconstitutional. And if we get ruled against us, we're going to go straight to the Supreme Court on it, because they're wrong. They can't do it.
Can you you're gonna send me all those links, and I'm gonna include them in the YouTube description. So if people want to donate, and I certainly will, you can click on those links and donate to this cause, which I think is something that's just absolutely wonderful and terrific. Changing tacks a little bit, I do want to talk to you because one of my favorite guests, and I'm guessing you probably have a positive relationship with him, although I don't know, everyone's feuding these days. Do you know Robert Barnes? Do you have a positive relationship with him?
Oh, I know who he is. Yeah, a good guy, smart guy,
Yeah,
for
he's
sure.
been a guest on the show, and every time he's been on, it's just been a superb episode because I wasn't following the Kyle Rittenhouse case because it was just so much propaganda, and I had him on, and he broke it down beat by beat. It was just a superb episode. I want to hear, because everyone has an opinion on whatever legal issue is in front of the public eye at the moment, even though very few of us are attorneys, thankfully. No offense. I would like to hear your thoughts on the President Trump indictment. Specifically, how strong of a case do you think the prosecutor has made? And also, the impression I've been getting, or at least from the news, is that this prosecutor is a well-respected, intelligent guy who does a good job, and he's someone to be concerned about, but is also somewhat fair. Can you just give some maybe visceral thoughts, both about him personally, if you have any information, and about the indictment insofar as you've read it?
I give the strongest possible criticism under the world for the prosecutor, Jack
Oh,
Smith.
wow. Okay.
I think that what he's doing is disgusting. I think that it's egregious. I think that he should recuse himself from the case immediately. He should have never been on it.
Why should
Um,
he recuse himself? What circumstance would cause someone to recuse themselves?
his wife filmed like some epic documentary about the Obamas. I mean, the legacy relationships
Okay.
between those people and the Obamas and the Biden family should preclude him immediately. If you're coming in as special counsel or special prosecutor of any kind, the idea is that you're pristine and you're clean, you've been vetted, that
Right.
you're above reproach. And this guy is not above reproach. Has he done honorable work? Is he a smart guy? Did he do good work in the International Criminal Court and other places he was? Sure. Brilliant guy. Is he doing the right thing? No. My understanding is that in the grand jury that he crossed the line on multiple occasions in order to convince the grand jury to indict in Florida. You can't do that. If I recall, Donald Trump was the only president in the last I don't know how many years to not send this country to war,
Right.
to not put us into needless wars and battles with other countries. So how is it the one guy who hasn't done that, who has a track record of not doing that, is now being accused of, yeah, you got this document and this is what you're going to do, blah, blah, blah. It's absolute ridiculousness. Do I think that he's going to win? I think that if he gets a fair judge and that if he gets a fair jury, I think that he will win. I do think that he will win because he hasn't done anything wrong. Now, if this were in Washington, D.C., and if he was in D.C. District Court, in front of a DC jury, not a snowball's chance in hell would he win. He'd have zero chance of winning. That's my greater concern. My greater concern is him ending up in that court. But with regard to the case in Florida, with regard to the case look at the case in New York City. Come on. It's ridiculous. They look desperate. It's political. It's wrong. It should not be happening. And all they're doing is boosting his numbers, boosting his donations, potentially be at a point in this country where a man who is actively being persecuted or even in jail becomes president. What does that look like? They're going to turn Trump into Mandela if they don't stop. People think that's just like a hyperbolic statement. It is not. They're doing everything they can do to martyr him. They're doing everything they can do to politically assassinate him. It's not going to work. The movement is only growing in strength, and and in numbers and in income. I don't know what they think that they're doing, but at the end of the day, if they were ever worried about radicalizing people, or if they were ever worried about getting people to run for office at every level in government, from your school board to the presidency of the United States, they have done it. They have mobilized and they have galvanized people generationally in this country to run against the other side because of what they're doing.
I'm not surprised to hear that the perception of this prosecutor that has been bandied about is a result of just blatant propaganda. So I'm glad to hear your clarification of that. And what you just said reminds me a little bit of what Emma Goldman said when she was arrested needlessly in connection with the William McKinley assassination in 1901, where she said, "I'd like to thank the cops for turning so many people into anarchists. They're doing far more work than I have in my years." So yeah, if if their concern is, as is claimed, the radicalization of people and people not having a buy-in to the system, this is certainly a great way to convince huge percentage of the populations that the system is stacked against them and it's rules for me but not for thee. You asked why they're doing this. I think it's very clear the reason they're doing this is to make an example of him, don't you think? I mean, look at
Yeah.
Kavanaugh. If I were trying to go for a prominent judge position and all that could be done to me and my family, it's like, you know what? I'll take my corporate gig, get my big paychecks, and keep my face off the television. I think that's just a very clear example of what they're trying to do, and it's often successful.
It's successful and it's unfortunate. I mean, politicians like lies more than they like the truth,
Yes.
right?
You're Welcome with Michael Malice is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Folks, most of you listening right now are probably multitasking. Yep, you're listening to me talk, but you're also driving, cleaning, exercising, maybe even grocery shopping. But if you're not in some kind of moving vehicle, there's something else you could be doing right now, which is getting an auto quote from Progressive Insurance. It's easy and you can save money by doing it right from your phone. Drivers who save by switching to Progressive save nearly $700 on average, and auto customers qualify for an average of 7 discounts. Discounts for having multiple vehicles on your policy, being a homeowner, and more. So just like your favorite podcast, Progressive will be with you 24/7, 365 days a year, so you're protected no matter what. Multitask right now. Quote your car insurance at Progressive.com to join the over 29 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $698 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2021 and May 2022. Potential savings will vary. Discounts not available in all states and situations. Let's get back to the show. So is this the kind of thing where, in your experience, and this is going to be an unprecedented case, no president has been charged with federal charges before, that they can kind of run the clock until November 2024? Or is this the kind of thing where in normal circumstances this will be resolved within a few months?
That's a great question. I think that they're going to do their best to run it as closely as they can and then try to force it, sort of bottleneck it, if you will, and produce results favorable to them, while getting an indictment in D.C. as well to hang over his head. I mean, this is certainly it's an effort to disqualify him from ever running again. But you know what? As far as I can tell, the founding fathers never built in any exception into the Constitution saying that a man who's been even convicted of a felony can't run, because
Right.
they did not want the justice system to be politicized against political candidates. But to your question, yeah, they're gonna drain his money and give him the most hard time as possible up until the very last second. But I mean, there is no quitting that man. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens.
What would you think is the strongest defense for him to put forward?
I mean, it's hard. It's hard to say. Just as a layman, what I know, as a lawyer, I haven't studied the law, and he's got a great legal team around him. But
Okay.
the truth is that he had a right to classify these documents. They're going to say under this act and that act and blah, 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 blah. It's like, look, I had a right to do this. I could have done it at any time. You don't know what my intentions were behind having these documents. You have to prove that I didn't classify them. You have to prove that I had some kind of nefarious intent to use them or mismanage them in the way that breaks the National Archives rules and regulations. There's no way in hell they're going to be able to have the evidence to prove any of that. This is a show trial. This is what authoritarian regimes do to their political opponents and their political dissidents. They parade them out in front of the world for the world to see, and then they'll either come up with some very unfair result, or truth and justice will once again have its day in this country.
What did you think, just as a person, on your personal opinion, Vivek, who's another presidential candidate, uh, last week came out with the idea that he said he will be pardoning President Trump, and he called on all the Republican candidates who are running for president to make that same vow, that if they are elected instead of him, that they would pardon him. What'd you think of that stance that he took?
Brilliant. Brilliant way to distinguish yourself. Absolute stroke of brilliance. Anybody who doesn't get behind him on that is a dead to rights loser on that situation.
Can you? I just realized something else you mentioned earlier. You said that you have one of your clients is still being held in captivity. Can you explain what is distinguishing their case from the others that you've been successful with?
That's a hard one. He's actually no longer my client.
Okay.
When you represent somebody for 2 years and you get everybody else out, including guys who have similar cases to his, you get them out, and you have sort of the same reasons,
Yeah.
and he doesn't get out. He looks at you and he says, I think that we've reached a natural conclusion. Maybe he thinks I didn't do the job I could have or should have. Maybe he thinks I love my other clients more. Maybe I know for sure he thinks the judge hates me too much because he said it. I went to war in that case with the judge. I had to go up in front of the judge and explain myself, and the threat of the disciplinary proceedings was dispensed with. But if you stand up too much in DC, they will try to take your license, right? So that they threatened me with taking my license. I was able to go up there and say, look, I dot all my I's, I cross all my T's. I am an ethical man. I keep immaculate records. I come off as this guy from Bensonhurst, and I'm a brawler, and I'm a fighter, I'm a street guy. But when it comes to the business end of things and documenting, I'm rock solid. So I was able to produce the truth, and it went away very quickly. The difficulty with the court and the difficulty with that judge, he just thought it was in his best interest for him to find another lawyer because of the judge's contempt for me. And I can't say that I blame him. So, the best of luck to him. But I do think, to answer your question, why did he not get out? I think it's because of some of the statements that he made during the 6th, and some of the altercations that he was involved in. For whatever reason, there's a few people that the court just locked onto and wants to make an example of. And they just were not willing to let him go.
Can you speak, if I don't know if you're in a position to legally, about your clients and how they're trying to transition back to any semblance of normalcy? Because they've got giant swords over their heads, and I don't know how I would try to have anything remotely close to normal life, even after I got out, with walking around with having the federal government's revolver pointing the back of my head 24/7.
That's it's a great question. And recidivism is something that we know about, right? And guys often go back to jail because jail represents consistency. They become institutionalized. Believe it or not, there's some type of hierarchy, social hierarchy. They have friends, they're fed, and some guys' lives are so bad that they'd actually rather go back to jail than deal with life in the street. Now, that's really unfortunate. And then you have these January 6 guys,
Right.
Ryan Nichols, right? Ryan Nichols, decorated Marine Corps veteran. He was on Ellen DeGeneres' show because he got highlighted for search and rescue work. He does about 80 to 100 days a year, rescuing all kinds of people, primarily people in downtrodden areas where FEMA and the government won't go. When a disaster hits, they go to the ritzy part of town before they get to the projects. Ryan and his crew go in, rescue these people out. He owns a prospering business. He's a father to 2 young sons. He's married to his wife Bonnie for almost 10 years. The best of what America has to offer. And he had PTSD going into this.
Yeah.
And he's a broken, lesser, more troubled version of his former self. You go in, if I show you a picture, I'll send it to you. You see a picture of this blonde-haired, blue-eyed, beautiful American young guy with hope and promise. And you look at him and you go, wow, this is a guy who's a hero. He's been celebrated. These Weather Channel's getting ready to give him like some kind of storm chasing show. He's doing great. And then you look at him after his encounter with the federal government on January 6th, and it'll bring tears to your eyes because, you know, and when you look at his test results, you know, his liver enzymes are through the roof, his vitamin D is in the garbage, his thyroid's out of whack because they were feeding him stuff. No sunlight, kept him in a place with chemicals. The guy's messed up. He may, in fact, even be dying from his liver. And for what? Because of one bad day in his life where he never even pushed a cop. He said some wild stuff and did some things that were unsavory, but it was not out of line. It was commiserate with the 2 years of protest that had preceded it. And this isn't right. So how does a guy come back and function into society again? Well, number one, it's impossible for him to do that. It's very hard for him to even work on his case because of the looming threat that's over his head. Psychologically, it's like having the angel of death over you. It could come, the reaper could come in any minute, and you don't know how long it's going to take you away from. So we have to overcome that every day just to get him to work on its case. In terms of how he comes back into the world and functions again, well, he's supported by his family. He's loved by his community. He's one of my clients who's got an income, and he's got a good structure around him. Dissimilar to some of these other guys and many other people who I've represented before, he has people who care about him and people who will nurse him back to life when he gets out again. If you don't have that, you know, and if you are a guy in his situation, a military veteran with PTSD with no family, and I know a few of them, wives and families who have left these guys. I know one guy, Jeff McKillop. I mean, just this guy was a decorated special ops guy who was all over the Middle East, like went to war, serious war for his country. Family broke up afterwards. Guy like that, he may get out and put a rope around his neck or blow his brains out. I mean, that's the reality of situations. Veterans with PTSD have a high suicide rate on a normal day. Veterans who've gone through January 6th with PTSD, I mean, I shudder at the thought.
Well, this has been a lot less fun than the Roseanne episode, I can assure you.
Sorry.
I mean, listen, I mean, a lot of my work has to do with the depravity of government. So this is one of those situations where I am not happy to say that I told you so. And that to all the conservatives who think that the Constitution is doing a good job protecting you against the overreaches of government, just you wait until the government decides otherwise, and then who you're going to call, because Ghostbusters aren't going to be picking up. So I was anticipating this, but hearing it from the horse's mouth is very disheartening.
And if I could just make an appeal to your listeners, because
Sure.
I know you have a wide base of people and you have a very diverse group of people in your life. Let me apologize on behalf of every Trump supporter out there who's ever offended you, or if you found their politics or their religious beliefs offensive. Let me apologize because for the disconnect between the white community, the affluent community, and the indigent and or minority communities when it comes to criminal justice reform. Nobody listened to you when they should have listened to you, and everybody should take responsibility for that. But now it's happening to another group of people in this country. And while they're not members of your community, turning a blind eye and a deaf ear to them would be to perpetuate the same injustice that happened to you. So if you care about that cause, if you care about true justice in this country, if you care about the state of our country, the worth and the weight of our Constitution, and what it means to be an American citizen, please forgive. Please accept, please embrace, and please help us. Please help these people. We run the risk of political tribalism, and that's what separates this country from every other country that the world has ever known. It's that everybody or anybody from anywhere could come here and could figure it out. We're not figuring it out now because we're not talking to each other. So please accept my most sincerest apology on behalf of everyone I represent, on behalf of the world that I'm plugged into right now. But let me express to you the very real truth. And that is people from this world need your help, want your help, are willing to talk to you, are willing to humble themselves and come to the table with you if you're willing to step out and stick out the arm of compassion and embrace your fellow citizen once again.
You know, now I could have a joke. Good. Because D.L. Hughley, when I was working with him on this book, he had this great line. He goes, the reason we're so loud is because we've been yelling about this stuff for years and you thought we were making it all up. And now that you're seeing it happen to you, you realize, wait a minute, these guys were saying something factual. Joe, we're running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this interview?
My favorite part of this interview, let's see here. You know, I think honestly, it's just been the banter. It's been the back and forth, intelligent, high level conversation, the objectivity, and the very real fact that you and I share a friend in common out in the real world. I think that that's an awesome thing, and that's not, it goes to show you that despite how big the world is, it's still a very small place.
You are welcome.
This is Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Fetisi.
I love hearing people's stories of resilience and grit. This is why I created this podcast.
We are very excited to welcome Jim Gaffigan, Yasmin Mohammed, Glenn Beck, Tim Dillon, Abigail Schreier, Jeff Garland, Ayan Hirsi Ali, Sam Harris, Heather Hying, Jonah Goldberg, Ben Shapiro, Glenn Greenwald, Sarah Shahi, Colin Quinn.
If there's a culture of victimhood, then let's tell stories of grit and survival.
Subscribe and listen now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.